Just need to give you a wee second. Okay, so I think we're now recording. Okay. Can we note then apologies for absence, please?
I've only been advised of one apology for absence, convener, and that is from Councillor McLean.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay. Are there any declarations of interest in respect of any items? No? Okay, thank you. So before we begin the formal agenda, I just want to give another welcome, which is to Rosemary, Mr. Crossan from St John's, head teacher, who joins us this morning because we obviously have St John's report, Education Scotland report on the agenda. And wonderful to have Rosemary with us, and also ask her at the end of the contributions on that item to just respond on behalf of the school. So thank you for joining us, and I'm sure it's been a very busy few days and this week, so thank you for taking the time. Okay, so we then come to item 3 in the agenda, which is the SQA examination diet for 2020, and Dr. Ratter is going to give us an oral presentation.
Thank you, convener. Following the decision to close all the schools from the 20th of March, the Deputy First Minister announced that for the first time in history, there would be no examination diet. Elected members will be aware that SQA were asked to put in place an alternative certification model based on teachers providing refined estimated bands and ranking for each learner entered for National 5, Higher and Advanced Higher. Schools submitted their estimates by the 29th of May, and subsequently the SQA carried out a process of moderation designed to ensure consistency across schools and colleges and with results from previous years. This was based on the average attainment in each subject over the last 4 years in each school, and no account was taken of prior attainment at an individual pupil level. Learners received their 2020 results on Tuesday, the 4th of August. And you'll be aware from some of the press coverage that there was a strong set of results across East Renfrewshire, with S4 attainment very similar to the previous year, and our performance in S5 and S6 at that stage the highest to date. Elected members will be aware from the paper that was shared at Education Committee in June that the department had anticipated very strong attainment, particularly in S5 and S6, based on the results that we had in 2019. And it was worth noting that the projections that had been made by the EMIS unit in September 2019 were very close to the authority results. However, committee will be very aware that concerns were expressed nationally that the SQA moderation process had disproportionately affected particular schools or groups of learners. Nationally, 26% of entries were adjusted. Nearly 7% were adjusted up, and 93% were adjusted down. Overall, in East Renfrewshire, 77% of our estimates were accepted above the national picture of 74. As a result then of the ministerial direction announced on the 11th of August, SQA are now in the process of awarding candidate results based solely on the estimates provided by schools and colleges. The results of learners who were awarded a higher grade during that process will be maintained, and SQA have agreed to ensure that the schools receive their confirmed results by the 21st of August, and any candidate who has had a grade changed as a result of this will receive a new certificate. Based on the estimate data that our schools submitted, and taking account of the learners who were awarded a higher grade during the moderation process, the Education Department has carried out some initial analysis at a high level. More detailed analysis obviously will be carried out, including a sort of focused look on equity, once we receive the updated information from the SQA. But I want to report a few key points at this stage. So based on the new data, at National 5 in S4, 81% of East Renfrewshire's cohort achieved 5 or more awards, up from 78% in 2019. 95% of S4 pupils achieved 5 or more qualifications at National 4 or better, which was similar to this time last year. Barhead, Eastwood, Mearnscastle, St Ninians and Wood Farm High Schools all achieved their best ever S4 results. As indicated and as anticipated, the higher results for S5 pupils were very strong across all measures. 87% of the original roll achieved 1 or more hires, and 72% attained 3 or more hires. In both measures, there was an increase of around about 6%. And the proportion of the roll that achieved 5 or more hires was 49%, up from 44% the previous year, and the highest result to date. It's worth noting that all East Renfrewshire schools had some strong results at S5, but perhaps particularly to highlight Barhead, Eastwood and Wood Farm, who had their best results for all 3 measures. And finally, at Advanced Higher in S6, the performance across the authority was also very strong, with 45% of the original 4th year cohort achieving 1 or more advanced hires, up from 40% the previous year. Eastwood, Mearnscastle, Williamwood and Wood Farm had their best ever results for this particular measure. As a result of the changes that have been made, the SQA has updated its appeal process. Appeals can now only be made on the basis of 3 grounds. That they are an internal error made by the SQA, administrative error made by the school when they submitted the original estimate, or evidence of discriminatory practice contrary to the Equalities Act. Elected members will be aware that the Scottish ministers have agreed and established an independent review of the process that's taken place in 2020 around awards, and they've also expanded the scope of the review of Curriculum for Excellence, which is being undertaken by the OECD, to include some recommendations on how to transform Scotland's approach to assessment and qualifications. And East Renfrewshire will contribute to both of those reviews through our work through ADES. In addition, the SQA is currently engaging on their plans for 2021, including the timing of the exams next year and the assessment arrangements that will be put in place for National 5 Higher and Advanced Higher. The Education Department will contribute to these consultations and has encouraged all our schools to take part. The feedback from those will be vital in ensuring that appropriate modifications are put in place for the courses, and that the timing of the examinations next year, and that they provide clarity and reassurance for the staff and the pupils and parents involved. This oral statement is unlike any that has previously been made and reflects the unique way in which the 2020 results have been arrived at. The closure of schools in March and the subsequent cancellation of the exam diet has resulted in a great deal of uncertainty and in many cases worry for our young people. The estimate process has been hugely demanding for the staff in all our schools, and I'd like to take the opportunity to acknowledge and thank them for all their work through that. I'm confident that throughout this, East Renfrewshire schools have done their utmost to ensure that the hard work of all our young people is rightly and fairly recognised. And the successes that have been highlighted at S4, S5 and S6 are a tribute to the hard work and dedication of the pupils across East Renfrewshire, exceptionally well supported by our staff and their parents, and all involved should be congratulated and the achievements of our young people recognised and celebrated. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much, Mark, for that very helpful report. This is obviously has been a very topical subject. It has dominated much of the political debate of the last few weeks. I think I would want to open by reiterating those comments that you made, Mark, which is a thanks to all of our teachers for their work in terms of estimating the grades in a very unusual and unprecedented set of circumstances. And I think for the forbearance and patience of our young people and their dedication to pushing the government to reconsider their approach as well. I think that's something that we could all agree has been admirable. Councillor Wallace, I can see your hand, so I'll bring you in first.
Thank you, Convener. You mentioned there that, am I right in thinking, did you say 77% of our marking was accepted? Is that correct, Dr. Ratter? Yep. Yeah. When do we find out about the 23%? Is that tomorrow that these results are coming through, or do we hear any earlier than that?
The schools will be contacted at the very latest by tomorrow. I think some of our schools have already found out, but essentially the schools have that information anyway because they made the estimates and submitted that. So where a young person had an estimate of a C and that might have been downgraded by the SQA to a D, the schools are aware of that information and they have shared the estimates with young people where there were concerns that they weren't in line with what they had expected.
If I could just come back in that, convener, could I?
Yes,
Yep,
yes.
thank you. Just then, with that 23%, what was the outcome for East Renfrewshire pupils? That is, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's the same outcome as the national one in that any of those grades that have been downgraded have now been will be awarded on the basis of the teacher estimates. So we had a similar proportion of ours that were amended by the SQA. We had around about 7% that were increased. The remaining were downgraded. So those will now be awarded on the basis of the school's original estimate.
Okay, thank you, convener.
Okay. Any further contributions at this stage? I see Dr. Angel's hand. Frank?
Thank you, convener, and I hope you're keeping well, Paul. I just think it's very good news that some of the schools that have not been doing as well as the top performers have now come up in standard, and I think all the education department and all the teachers should be congratulated on the differential between the middle ranking and the top ranking schools being reduced.
Okay, thank you for that comment. I see Councillor Merrick and then Councillor Lafferty. So Colm and then Alan. You're on mute, Colm.
You would think by now I would be used to this. Apologies for that. That probably saved you a bit more nonsense to listen to. But anyway, thank you very much, Dr. Ratter, for the report. And I think one of the points that we have to make here is the work that teachers put in, not just towards the end when the pressure was really on them, I thought, but throughout the year, our teachers do a fantastic job educating the children. And for the children then for the young people to get the results that they deserve is really important. Because when we talk about a mass of pupils, we're talking about individual people, and these are life-changing events, these exam results. So it really is important that they get on to the next step, pandemic or not. In fact, more important this year that everything has been put in turmoil with this pandemic. So thanks very much to the teachers, the staff, schools, and the education department who saw us through this very difficult time.
Thank you for that contribution. Councillor Lafferty.
Thank you, convener. I have to apologise in that I was trying to slip in an item of business that's not on the agenda, but I perhaps will do that at one of the subsequent items. Hopefully they will be indulgent.
As long as it has relevance, Councillor, I'll try my very best. Okay, do we have any further contributions on this item? Anyone I've missed?
Councillor Buchanan, Chair.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, Tony.
Thanks, Paul. I think just initially to echo the comments that Mark made and indeed others in regards to the work of our teaching staff over the last few months, which has been incredible to ensure that everyone was given a positive marking from the point of view that they had done the work, they had watched their pupils over the months and therefore gave them a marking accordingly. So I think it's important to recognise that despite the lockdown, that many of our staff continued to work and were indeed putting in additional work to ensure that the process for students across East Renfrewshire was done to the very best of their ability. And I think that has to be looked at. And congratulations to our staff for taking that forward at a very difficult time. So I think that's one of the first things. And again, obviously to our students as well, for the work that they had put in over the course of the year to ensure that their marks are justified. I think, as we all know, there has been numerous ongoings over the last few weeks about the methodology of it. It's been extremely difficult. I think a lot of lessons have probably been learned in relation to that, given that the future is still not certain and where we will be this time next year. So I think a lot of work has been done by the Education Department to ensure that we can move those issues forward, hopefully in a manner which is the most suitable for our young people. I think out with that, again, we've come to expect good results across East Renfrewshire, and the marks which we appear to have and we're anticipating are extremely positive and good, and that stands us in good stead, as has come to be the norm in many respects over recent years. But it's fantastic to see that work provided by our Education Department goes on to ensure that we do the very best for our young people. So thank you very much to all.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Buchanan. I see Councillor Bamforth, and I think Mrs. Shaw wanted to come in, so I'll maybe bring her in at the tail end of the comments. So Caroline.
Thanks, Chair. Like everyone else, I want to echo my congratulations to the pupils, the teachers and all the Education Department for all the work they've put in. But what I thought was notable from Mark's comments were that the EMIS projections were consistent with the results that were given, which just shows the accuracy and the strength of our tracking and prediction system. So I found that one of the other comforting factors, as well as how well the children did. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Convener. It was just to sort of follow up on a few comments that had been made. In our analysis of the original results that had been given, we weren't seeing a correlation between postcode or particular schools or indeed youngsters living with poverty. But now that has been rectified, I think certainly youngsters have had their efforts recognised. I think though 77% of our teacher judgments being moderated as accurate is something that I think we need to work on. I do think that in terms of our next steps, we need to be continuing our work on teacher assessment and making sure that in the future, should there be another similar sort of, because there's no guarantee, I don't think that we'll have an exam sort of process next year. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us in terms of making sure that we get some of the excellent practices that there are in some of our schools and that is shared across the whole of the authority. But very pleasing is the fact that the number of appeals that we were anticipating has dropped dramatically. And that means that our parents and children have faith in our teacher judgments. And he said, on the whole, there are always a number of appeals. And there's always a moderation process with the SQA every year. So I don't think we should sort of blow this out of all proportion, but we need to make sure that youngsters are on the right courses now and that they are supported to achieve success on those courses, whether they're in 5th year or 6th year, or indeed have gone on to university or further education or whatever their chosen destination was. But I echo the remarks of almost everyone about the efforts, and there were huge efforts put in by class teachers to make sure that their estimates were accurate, that there was evidence behind them, and therefore they were rightly demonstrating a pupil's progress as well as their achievements, but also by pupils. I know that this has been a very worrying time for them, and I do congratulate them on their achievements and obviously on the support that they've had from staff, but also from parents. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Mrs. Shaw. Do we have any further comments or contributions? Okay, I think then just to perhaps sum up, I think we would all want to put on record our congratulations to our young people. They are at the heart of everything we do in East Renfrewshire. It's been a very difficult period for them with the uncertainty, and then with obviously the solution that was found to amend grades. So I think we want to first and foremost pass on our congratulations and thoughts with them. But also I think, and this has been points been well made, our thanks to our teaching and support staff for all of their efforts, and of course our thanks to the directorate team and for all the work that they have done in ensuring that we have another good and robust set of results. And I think just to end perhaps that key point about learning from this, the learning from this whole experience, I think for us in East Renfrewshire and also nationally, and I think just making sure that we keep a watching brief on the situation as we move towards the next diet to ensure that the government are engaging constructively with local authorities so that we can have a system, as I say, that is robust and gets people the results that they deserve. So thank you everyone for your contributions on that. That paper's just for noting, and we'll obviously have further detail at a later date as we move forward. We come then to item 4, which is Education Scotland's report on St John's Primary School. And this is Dr. Ratter again.
Thank you very much, Convener. This paper informs elected members of the Education Scotland report on St John's Primary School. The school was inspected by Education Scotland in November 2019, and under the arrangements, Education Scotland evaluated 4 quality indicators and provide a short report detailing the strengths and areas for improvement. And a copy of that report is included in your papers as Appendix 1. In assessing the indicators of quality in the primary school, Education Scotland found 3 aspects of the work to be good, namely leadership of change, learning, teaching and assessment, and raising attainment and achievement. Ensuring well-being, equality and inclusion was judged to be very good. The key strengths are listed in paragraph 6 of the cover paper, and they include the work of the leadership team in the way that they've established the strong relationships across the school community, and that is providing extended experiences for all children and support to the children and families. The teachers' enthusiastic and collaborative approaches to professional learning, which is leading to improved outcomes for children, and the effective approaches to digital learning, which are enhancing and enriching learning across the curriculum. This is a good report on an East Renfrewshire school, with the evaluations made by Education Scotland reflecting the increased expectations that there are nationally and the department's evaluation of the quality of provision. The department is pleased that the leadership of the head teacher was noted in the letter as one of the strengths, particularly the way that the head teacher has created those strong relationships and a sense of belonging where the children feel happy. The inspection team agreed 2 areas for improvement with the school and with the education department, and they're listed in the paper. And they highlight that the newly established senior leadership team should continue to improve the monitoring and tracking of children's progress to ensure a clear focus on raising attainment across all curriculum areas, and continue to develop a cohesive and a consistent approach to assessment across the school. Appendix 2 of the paper, which is in pages 9 to 11 of your papers, sets out the school's action plan to address these agreed areas for improvement. It's worth noting that the areas for improvement are particularly important in the context of our pupils having returned after their absence from COVID-19, and the schools incorporated these into their own recovery plan for going forward. The Quality Improvement Service will work closely with the school and leadership team to support its implementation, and will revisit the school within 2 years of the date of publication to review the impact of the school action plan in addressing these agreed areas for improvement. Elected members are asked to note and comment on the contents of the Education Scotland report on St John's Primary and approve the school's action plan to address the agreed areas for improvement. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ratter. I think we would want to obviously give our congratulations to the school on their support. But certainly I'm open to any comments or contributions at this stage. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, convener. Firstly, just to say, I'm aware that this is a new inspection regime that we're now come under. Where in East Renfrewshire, we're used to the words excellent coming through in our reports, and I appreciate now that it's more goods and very goods, so I wouldn't necessarily direct my comments in that area. What does concern me, or I would comment on, I'd value some feedback from Dr. Ratter on this. We've just heard how excellent our assessment process, how wonderful our monitoring and tracking for our secondary schools are, particularly given the level of acceptance of the results from SQA. And yet here we have a report that runs contrary to everything that we've just been talking about.
Colin Merrick
is now joining.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Dr. Ratter, just if you could perhaps give me some feedback in terms of this report, or the concerns about assessment, the concerns about monitoring and tracking. Is this peculiar to St John's, or is it a thing that's widespread maybe in our primary schools? Is it about location? We've heard from the Director of Education there about trying to spread best practice about what's happened here. Thank you.
Mark.
And thank you, Councillor. I mean, you'll see if you, in terms of the report, that Education Scotland looked quite holistically at the process. They confirmed that the approach that the school had towards tracking was a very strong one. And in terms of those comparisons, as you were mentioning, it's a very similar approach to, in terms of the systems that they would use in Our Lady of the Missions. And, you know, there was a school that had a very good and an excellent. So essentially the work there was around that development and particularly supporting the children with that approach in assessment. So you'll see that it highlights the need to make sure that the children are really able to articulate their own strengths. So the school has further work to do there in terms of that self-assessment of helping the learners understand that, making sure that the assessment approach is holistic, and making sure that across the staff there is that shared understanding. And that's what the action plan does do there. And within East Renfrewshire, we do have that excellent practice that we can draw upon, but it is about making sure that that's then consistently applied across all of our schools.
Okay, thank you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Mrs. Shaw, do you want to come on this item, or this question? Because I have Mrs. Graham, but I'll bring her in next if Mrs. Shaw wants to comment.
Yeah. Thanks, convener. It was really just to point out that the recommendation is to continue to improve. It's not that there's no monitoring and tracking of children's progress, but as Dr. Ratter had said, it's about making sure that that understanding of the standards across the school, and that is not unusual in East Renfrewshire, between schools and within schools, but certainly across the country as well. So essentially, Education Scotland are saying that the work is there. We just need to make sure that it has the progress, the impact that we want it to have.
Okay, thank you for that contribution. Mrs. Graham.
Thanks, convener. I just wanted to say that I was very pleased to read this report, and in particular that this first paragraph which talked about the positive caring ethos based on Catholic values. And I was delighted that the leadership and the staff work ensuring that pupils feel happy and valued. I think that's a wonderful thing to say, that pupils were happy and that they were valued. And this was mentioned in the very first paragraph. I was delighted to see that that was recognised. And I'd just like to offer my congratulations to all concerned.
Thank you. Councillor Buchanan. Oh, you're muted, Tony.
Get there better this time. Just to echo the comments made, again, this is a good report. It's good to see that the school is performing well, and indeed the new system for reporting that we are managing to deal with that as we learn what HMI are actually looking for in taking things forward. So I think the outcomes that we get will improve as they always do, but this is a good report and a great starting point. My congratulations to the head teacher, to Mrs. Crossan, because quite clearly it's been recognised that the leadership team in the school are going in the right direction, and will no doubt make those improvements that they have been asked to do. So yeah, I think on the whole, we've got to recognise this is a good report.
Any further comments? No. So I think I would obviously, on behalf of committee, want to extend our thanks and congratulations to the school for a good report. For I think those areas that have been highlighted, I think a real commitment in the school now to continuous and ongoing improvement, to continue to drive forward the change that is always needed in our schools to kind of drive forward that improvement that I talk about. But I think I want to highlight particularly the report paragraph that talks about the strength of the head teacher and the leadership of the school. I think, you know, Mrs. Crossan has really driven forward the improvement within St John's. She has contributed hugely to the ethos that has been highlighted as being a real strength of the school. And she has made young people feel valued and happy and safe at school. And I think that is what we would all want to see within all of our schools. And is surrounded by a fairly new leadership team as well, who have really started on their journey as well to contribute to that continuous improvement. So I think Mrs. Crossan is with us. She's taking time out, as I say, of a busy schedule, or a busy week back in school. And I'm going to just ask her to respond to committee if she's happy to do that on behalf of St John's.
Thank you, convener, and thank you for the opportunity to address committee this morning. I'm very pleased, like others have said, that the report captured the nurturing and caring ethos of the school. As you are aware, this is an essential foundation for effective learning, and it's particularly important at this time as the children settle back into school after such an extended absence. I'm also proud that the strong Catholic ethos of the school was noted, and I agree wholeheartedly that our staff regularly demonstrate the school values of faith, love and understanding and the caring relationships they have with the children and their families. The creative approach to digital technology was rightly recognised as a strength, and the progress that we have made to date was further exemplified in the pupils' effective use of digital skills during the lockdown period. Little did we know that so quickly were those skills going to be put to the test. But the digital skills that the children had already learned proved invaluable in supporting their online learning provision during that period of lockdown. I'm proud of our enthusiastic and collaborative approach to professional learning, which is leading to improved outcomes for pupils. Our approaches to providing a range of learning environments, both indoor and outdoor, were also acknowledged by the team. We are committed to providing high quality outdoor learning experiences. Again, another really helpful factor as we're returning to school and being encouraged to use the outdoors as much as possible. The fact that both digital learning and outdoor learning have been utilised effectively within the current climate is further evidence that they were embedded in our practice. There were numerous references in the report to the strengths of our pupils, and I was delighted, although not surprised, to see references to their good manners, their behaviour, their enthusiasm and their willingness to learn. We're incredibly proud of them every day, but they have demonstrated their resilience and a thirst for learning throughout this lockdown period, and it's an absolute joy and privilege to see them back in school. Close partnership working with parents and the local community is very important to us, and we're working hard to ensure that we maintain those positive relationships within the current restrictions. I was pleased to read that the close relationships we have with families was highlighted in the report, and the strong existing relationships have been further strengthened through our approaches to ensuring pupil wellbeing during the time of school closure. I believe that the school is very well placed to take forward the recommendations in the report due primarily to the dedication and collegiality of the staff. I would like to thank all members of the school team, the teachers, pupil support assistants, and all of the ancillary staff, and all of our partners for their enthusiasm and commitment, and particularly the Catholic Church for their ongoing support. I would also like to thank yourself, the Convener of Education, and all members of the Education Committee for their support. The Quality Improvement Team and the Heads of Service from the Education Department provide invaluable ongoing support and advice to myself and to the whole school community. But of course, my biggest thanks goes to the pupils of St John's, who are already demonstrating their enthusiasm for learning in this very first week of term. I look forward to working with all of our partners as we strive to continually improve the outcomes for all of our learners. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Crossan, and please take our thanks back to all those involved, both for their support, but also for the return to school, which I know has been a big piece of work. But we're going to hear a report just next about some of that, but we certainly please pass on our best to everyone at St John's. So the report's just for noting, so we're happy to just note the report and agree the actions. Okay, Mrs. Crossan, you're welcome to get back to school if that's what you need to be doing. You're welcome to stay, of course, but
I don't know if you can hear the bell. That's just
there you go. The bell has sounded.
That's
okay. Thank you, Rosemary.
Very much, Convener. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, we come then to our final item this morning, which is the update on COVID planning, and Mr. Hay is going to take us through this paper.
Thank you very much, Convener. So the purpose of this report is obviously to update members on the department's recovery planning and the reopening of all of our schools and nurseries and children and young people in line with the Scottish Government's national guidance. By way of background, committee will recall the previous meeting in which the local delivery phasing plan was endorsed and also discussed. The plan set out our approach to blended learning and our kind of phased approach for the reopening of our schools in line with the guidance as it existed at that time. Following on from the previous committee meeting, the plan was submitted to Education Scotland for review. The full feedback received from Education Scotland is available for members in Appendix 2. But briefly, just to comment on that, it obviously recognised the strong processes and governance arrangements that we had in place, the clear phased approach we were taking to reopening of schools, and the kind of clear focus on the safety and well-being of our pupils throughout the plan. As members will know, shortly after the last committee meeting and obviously the submission of the local delivery phasing plan, Scottish Government announced that the aim of having all pupils back in school full-time from August. This decision was then later confirmed by the First Minister at the end of July, at which point we received quite detailed guidance from the Government to help us support our schools in achieving that aim and prepare for that. Obviously, members will note that was quite a kind of clear acceleration on our original phased approach, but something certainly that our schools have been keen to prepare for and keen to achieve. If I can just draw members' attention just to paragraph 9 in the report, the individual plans that have been prepared by head teachers in advance of the summer holiday for blended learning, obviously coming out of the local delivery phasing plan, are very much still part of our schools' approach. We recognise that there is a potential for an escalation of things in the weeks and months ahead, and these very much will form part of our contingency planning. So these remain under review by all schools and obviously can be deployed if we need to do so. So moving on to the kind of main body of the report, there's obviously been a huge effort by staff both across our own department but also the council as a whole to ensure that all of our schools and nurseries have been able to welcome back children and young people from last week, and with obviously pupils returning last Wednesday after quite a long absence. Members will note in paragraph 12 and 13 that there was template action plans based on the national guidance that were issued to all head teachers, and this was to help them prepare for the reopening of schools. Obviously there was quite detailed guidance, a lot of information came out, so it was important that we had that clarity for head teachers. Obviously these have been templates though, and we recognise that our individual schools are all very different, so they've obviously been able to tailor that for their own bespoke approach. Obviously that's not to say that there haven't been some teething problems, it's perhaps something we can come on to, but obviously we're working very closely with all of our schools to try and find those kind of locally school-driven solutions to some of these issues we've faced. In addition, I think it's also just important to recognise the robust risk assessment process that has been put in place, and these obviously continue to remain under review. We're working very closely with our colleagues in health and safety across the council to make sure that we've got all this in place. Paragraph 15 highlights the steps that have been taken to ensure that schools and nurseries are well prepared to deal with any children, young people or indeed staff who may start to display symptoms of COVID. We've got a really robust set of arrangements that are in place, and we're obviously continuing to monitor the guidance as it comes out and obviously update and review as necessary. Members will note from the report that we are continuing to work very closely with our partners, both in environmental health and the health protection team as well at the NHS, and will obviously be well placed to respond. I think it's just really important that we do know it is potentially quite likely that we will see some cases. We've had just a range of symptoms. Fortunately, so far, none have tested positive, and that's something we're obviously very pleased about. But we'll have to look at some of our neighbouring authorities to see some of the cases and things that have started to emerge. But we are got a whole range of plans in place, and we're able to respond to that as we need to, working with those partners. If I can just draw members' attention to paragraph 17, members will obviously be aware of the additional resources that have been made available from the Scottish Government to help us begin to address some of that learning loss that pupils have obviously faced across the last few months. So far, a total of £1.1 million has been confirmed, but we're expecting an additional approximately £600,000, but that's to be confirmed by CLOSLA in due course, and we'll obviously welcome that when it comes. These additional resources are very welcome, given the learning loss that all of our young people have experienced, and I think it is really important we stress that it is all young people who will have experienced this. Guidance has been provided to all of our head teachers to support their own considerations on how best to use this resource, and that's obviously in addition to the existing sort of PEF and additional 20% resources that they already have. So they're looking at that whole range of different measures that we can look to take. And obviously, as set out in the paper, we will be bringing back a report to the committee at a further date, a date in future, where we can have more information on that. Just briefly to touch on some of the kind of finance matters, committee will recognise the additional pressures that have been faced both by the department but also the council as a whole, obviously, due to the kind of situation we've faced over the last few months. Whereas the return of schools on a full-time basis and additional resources that I've just commented on to start to address that learning loss have been very welcome. There are obviously still significant ongoing expenditure which we must continue to meet, and this obviously remains a big challenge for us. We're of course continuing to monitor this, working with the council as a whole, and obviously elected members will remain updated on this in due course. So convener, in conclusion, it's of course very welcome that all of our schools and nurseries have been able to welcome children and young people back on a full-time basis over the last week, and that's something I'm sure we would all very much welcome. Given the continuing uncertainty of the pandemic, we recognise the risk of an outbreak or a confirmed case. However, I'd want to assure all members that we are taking all necessary steps, as outlined in the guidance, to maintain a safe environment, or as safe an environment as possible for all of our pupils and staff. Our schools and we as a department continue to keep our own contingency plans under review, and we're obviously going to be well placed to respond should this be required. So convener, it's recommended that the committee notes the contents of the report and endorses the recovery planning approach. welcomes the successful reopening of our schools and early year settings, and obviously the efforts of staff across the council in supporting this, and then obviously requests that further updates are provided on the department's recovery and use of these additional resources to begin to address learning loss amongst our pupils. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hay, for that very comprehensive overview of the report. Obviously, this has been a long journey to get to the point where schools have returned. There have been a wide variety of inputs, not least from our teaching staff and support staff, and indeed from the directorate staff. See, there's a degree of interest in the topic, which I had expected, so we'll take comments and questions. I'll start with Mr. Morris, and then I'll come to Councillors Lafferty and Bamford.
Thanks, convener, and good morning, everyone. No, I mean, I'll keep the comments really just fairly brief. I mean, we're just a short spell back into the full-time return of schools now. And really just firstly to note that the efforts of all teaching staff following the DFM's announcement of the 23rd of June, and then confirmation of the full reopening on the 30th. And I mean, I think it's been referred to in previous comments this morning, just the short timescales involved here. I think we've discussed this at the previous committee convener as well. It's required a huge amount of effort from not just the teaching staff, but all staff in schools and the department. And I think that the committee will want to note and appreciate all the efforts that have been put in. Clearly, there are two major challenges, really, I think, addressing, as Graham was saying there, that the learning loss and addressing the recovery curriculum that's required. And also, and I think the director's report acknowledges this, the challenges in ensuring that schools can operate safely going forward for all staff and all pupils in the schools. And in that regard, I am pleased to see that the department's Phase 4 action plan does place a premium on the safe return of schools and does, as far as I can see, reflect the Scottish Government guidance to date. And that's what, you know, the department has to, the basis that it has to work on. And we will have to wait and see if that changes as the weeks and months progress. But no doubt the local plans will reflect that as well. So suffice to say that I think going forward, we would probably all be in agreement for that, addressing learning loss and ensuring that that continues to be done in a safe manner for all. Really are the two main priorities. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. And can I maybe just take this opportunity to thank EIS and the other trade unions for their support and partnership in this process. I think it's been very constructive, and we'll continue to move forward in that vein. Councillor Lafferty.
Thank you, Convener. I certainly would like to echo your remarks regarding the role of staff in the unions, who, with the parents, young people and leadership, have affected a very positive outcome. Let's hope it's reflected elsewhere. I have had representations from constituents on more concrete measures regarding the return to school. There's been from a couple of the primary schools, there's concern about road safety. I don't propose to go into them, but I think Mr. Hayes already involved with some of the head, yes, in these issues, and that's good. I don't know if you are the person to involve in this matter at Williamwood High School, where I know it's a matter that concerns other elected members in that ward who can't be here, like Councillor Ireland and Councillor Miller. But we have a situation there where previously 3 buses arrived at the school to take pupils to the school and take them principally to Netherlee, which is probably gathers quite a walk on a wet day. And well, it will have an effect on pupils, I'm sure. But what concerned me was first bus First of all, it was the COVID-19 that was to blame for their inabilities to provide the service. And now that they're putting it around, it's East Renfrewshire Council who have pulled the funding for this valuable service. I would have thought the service from running past Williamwood High School to Netherley would wash its face in terms of the amount of young people who would wish to use it. So I was going to ask Mrs. Collins who would be the best person to help me. And it would seem it's yourself, Mr. Hay, if I could get in touch with you to discuss this matter further with the convener's indulgence.
Certainly, I appreciate we will all, as elected members, have had, I think, bits and pieces into our inbox about the return to school and particular issues. And I know that the Williamwood issue has been raised with all of us, I think. And I appreciate you put it on the record here on behalf of your constituents, Councillor Lafferty. I don't know how this has happened, but Mrs. Collins seems to have been given school transport, and I've not realised, because everyone seems to think it's Janice's responsibility. I actually sit in terms of the COVID context with Graham. So I don't know if Mr. Hay wants to briefly comment maybe on the broad issues and indeed on the school transport issue, and then perhaps it can be taken offline if there's further detail.
Yeah, certainly, Convener. I'm obviously conscious, yes, there has been a range of different issues that have emerged. Obviously, I kind of had alluded to that just in terms of some of the, we can call them kind of teething issues, I suppose, that we've had in terms of some of the kind of road safety elements and things, and that's certainly something we are looking to take forward. I think just specifically on the Williamwood issue, certainly the department had written to First Glasgow. Certainly, I know the local MP has been raising it for a number of months, and we've certainly also written to express our concern about that. Members of the kind of transport team are now looking at some potential sort of prices and things for that. I think we need to be very careful with it. Due to the kind of distance and things, it's not actually the council's responsibility to provide that transport. It had been an arrangement that First had put in place, and obviously it was taken up by parents. What we are more than happy to do is help kind of support if the parent council wish to take that forward. It's something we're more than happy to, help kind of facilitate. Obviously, we've got those contacts with providers and things, and we can help try and put that in place. But I do think we just need to be very careful about, we've obviously got a number of pressures on the kind of business support team and things within the department. So it's just trying to get that balance of what we can do. But certainly, I'm more than happy to kind of have a further conversation offline with yourself, Councillor, and obviously I know other councillors are also interested in this issue, so we can certainly look at taking that forward.
I think the parents would particularly welcome the opportunity to be involved. So I'm very thank you, and I apologise for barging this in, Convener. But as I was saying to other committee members, one of the problems with this COVID is we as elected members are not bumping into each other and exchanging views. It makes it just that wee bit difficult. I don't know if Councillor Wallace would agree that there's a benefit to us coming in and physically being present, but clearly that's not available just now.
If you're looking for a response to that, Councillor Lafferty. Yes, I just comment on your indulgence on making sure that your constituents are looked after within your particular ward. And what we're looking after are the benefit of education for all of East Renfrewshire. Sorry, I couldn't fail to comment on that.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair comment what Councillor Lafferty is saying, because we do miss out on the ability to be able to touch base with one another and exchange ideas, because by exchanging ideas we create new ones and benefit from that. But there we are. That's a side issue and something maybe we can solve in future. Okay, cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. And I promise to be as indulgent with the good people of Gifford and Thurles Bank at some point in the future.
Well looked after.
I think fair points made there, and Mr. Hay's going to come back with a response. We can maybe circulate that as well, a kind of standard response to folks on the actions that the department can take, and so on that particular issue. Okay, I'm going to move on from that. Councillor Bamforth, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you very much, Chair. Delighted to read this report showing how much work has gone into a very robust response. in the event of this pandemic, preventing our children from going back to school full time, and it's good to see that it's there. In the hopefully fingers crossed event that you know, we will have some local lockdown. So I was very comforted to see that. And I was particularly pleased to read about the steps taken to address the digital poverty in some of our children. I was very happy to see that. I've got a couple of questions, so if I tell you all the 3 questions, and then whoever is who the appropriate person can respond. The first thing I'd like to ask about is item 24 about enhanced cleaning. And there's a breakdown of it's about just over £1 million that's going to cost East End Council for cleaners, supplies, transport, etc. And the Scottish Government made a pledge of an extra 20 million to local authorities for such purposes. And I just wondered if we had any indication yet of how much of that 20 million we were going to get, and is it likely to cover that £1 million or so? The second thing I was going to ask was about one of our key principles is the safety of parents and children, and it was mentioned yesterday at the First Minister's press conference around parents, particularly at primary schools. It's not cool to do it at secondary schools, but standing around the school gates, and that is obviously it's adult behaviour. I'm just wondering if we are doing, I know it's supposed to be up to individual schools, but I wondered are we doing something, writing to parents, sending out in a newsletter to try and encourage fewer of them to stand around the school gates, which I know is really difficult, particularly for the early years, but I just wondered what we were doing. And the last question I was going to ask is you've given quite a lot of detail around shielding and clinically vulnerable staff, both teachers and CDOs, but the figures obviously in this paper were prior to the schools going back, and I wondered if we've got up-to-date figures in that. And I see that most of them will be redeployed, working from home, doing paperwork, organisation. So does that mean we've had to employ extra CDOs, teachers, to backfill the ones that are shielding and or clinically vulnerable? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Graham, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, certainly, Convener. I'm just kind of looking through. Certainly, I mean, obviously, if I can come just onto the safety element first, perhaps, Councillor. I know there has been, I think in some particular schools, just given the sort of geography of some of them and the layouts and things, there have been some particular challenges, and certainly we've maybe had more responses from parents in certain schools than others, and I think that's probably something that's been echoed certainly for different elected members in terms of their own inboxes. What we have been doing, certainly the council put out some kind of messages around just the importance of social distancing, obviously encouraging people where perhaps they were going to be in big crowds to look at face coverings and that kind of thing, just to make sure that we are obviously protecting the safety. Where we have kind of had to take a sort of presumption that parents wouldn't be coming into playgrounds. I think we're obviously very mindful of the safety of our staff and pupils, but I equally am conscious that that has put pressure on the areas outside of our schools. Certainly schools are trying their best to look at the different solutions that can be put in place. So where there are multiple different entrances that can be used, maybe slightly staggering some of the finishing times, things like that. I know certainly another school had advised me that they were having a sort of walking bus to different locations kind of close by the school, but perhaps not directly in the school, just so parents could collect from there and things. So there are a number of different measures that schools are looking at. So much will be dependent on individual schools. We have obviously been advising head teachers to be very clear in their communications. I think often school communications directly from the head teachers is the most valuable for parents, and I think it's probably the one that's most widely read. So I think we are trying to encourage that as much as possible through individual head teachers. They are kind of looking at quite bespoke solutions, but we're obviously working with schools where there are particular problems and trying to find what some of the solutions might be around that. In terms of the additional resources for cleaning, I'm not 100% sure of the specifics on that. I know we have had additional resources have come in. I think part of it is about sort of there is a future fund that we can bid into for additional expenditure. Certainly something we can get a wee bit more, happy to get more information, or I don't know if perhaps Fiona Morrison might want to come in just to update on that. But certainly it is something that there is an additional resource there which will help support that. Oh, sorry, I thought there was a noise there. And then finally, just on the kind of absence stats, obviously, as you said, the figures that were included in the appendix are related to the kind of pre-summer, and when obviously the shielding regime was very firmly in place, and we still had a number of kind of clinically vulnerable staff as well. I understand we have now had a massive reduction in staff who aren't able to come in. I think most of our staff have now been able to return to work, obviously where necessary, and we've looked at risk assessments that had to be put in place. Schools have been working on a very direct basis with that to look at what bespoke solutions might have to put in place to help support some of our staff with that. But certainly it is very, very low numbers now, if any, of staff that haven't been able to return to work, which has obviously been very welcome and is certainly something we would keep an eye on. Things can change. We're obviously very mindful of the sort of fluctuating situation we're in, but we are obviously working very closely with our staff on that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hay, for that response. Can I bring in Councillor Wallace?
Thank you, convener. Yeah, just looking, just with reference to our last committee meeting, or our previous committee meeting, we discussed blended learning. And I know Janice Collins was very vociferous in the sense that the blended learning that is reported of in the papers and media, etc., is not what we would term the real model of blended learning. And I know Janice Collins was very quick to say that we really were not carrying out any blended learning as such within East Renfrewshire. Really what we were doing was trying to replicate what was happening in the class. Now, I've just noticed on page 20, it mentions staffing, and it mentions how the blended model of learning that will be a necessity for any successful recovery in education will require a significant element of workforce flexibility. I'd be interested to hear what progress we have made in terms of training our teachers to use the blended model of learning. I'd be interested to know the amount of that support that we're getting from Scottish Government, the 1.1 million and the possibility of another 0.6 million. How much of that is being used to develop blended learning? From a personal point of view, I feel that it's been given a very bad press, that model of learning. I feel that East Renfrewshire would greatly benefit from the use of blended learning, particularly in later years as we prepare for things like college and universities. So, to get back to my original question, what have we been doing since our last committee meeting in terms of preparing for a blended model of learning? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think.
Could I come in just in direct response to that just now, and then I'll ask Dr. Ratter to respond in terms of the work that he's been doing on remote learning. I agree with Councillor Wallace. In actual fact, I don't think we were delivering blended learning at all. We were delivering remote learning. Blended learning was what would have been introduced had children come back partially to schools. But now that children are back full time, essentially there is no need for it. However, some of the skills that have been developed, both by children and teachers, are really useful in terms of addressing the learning loss that Mr. Morris referred to. So how can we use that remote learning, even instead of homework, with study support and so on, to capture the extra time that we need to capture that we've lost in terms of in-school learning. So I think I agree, it's a bit like a poison chalice actually, tends to have a sort of bad press, blended learning, but the skills that were developed during it I think will stand us in good stead, and not just to address learning loss, but indeed for the future. But Dr. Ratter will be able to tell you about the steps that have been taken to develop the Video Vault and the eSchool approach. Thanks, Convener.
Yeah, I'll bring Dr. Ratter in.
Thank you, Convener. Maybe just to build on the Director's sort of comments, Councillor Wallace, in terms of the digital skills, all our schools are working hard to make sure that I suppose those developments and those enhancements that have taken place over the last 5 months are not lost. So that has been built into their recovery plans. We're hearing from schools where they're making sure that the staff are continuing to upload and make use of the Google Classrooms and that online learning environment, so that when the children are then back at home, all their homework, lessons and so on are available on that. We've got a digital officer who's continuing to support them with that, and a sort of new area that's come forward is around Google Classrooms, which supports the ability to do in a safe way those live lessons. So we'll be making use of that in areas such as instrumental music, again to balance the safety aspects with the provision. In terms of the development of the online learning, what we've continued to do is work with our partners in the West Partnership. And over the summer, we had over 100 staff from across the West Partnership developing online lessons. So they've just started that. There's around about 200 lessons recorded already. The sort of, I suppose the approach there is, rather than seeing the individual teacher, they're essentially doing sort of recorded PowerPoint or voiced over lessons, because the evidence from research would say that when you see the teacher, that can be a distraction. It's actually about the content of the learning that's really crucial there. So they're rolling that out so that will be something then that all our schools can make use of. And should we have that sort of local lockdown, should we have members of staff that are unavailable, then those resources can be used for the pupils to access that. But as the Director was saying, I think that also provides us with a really key resource that we can use to address the learning loss as well, and provide those opportunities for the young people to go back over key topics that their teachers have taught them, but do it in a very efficient way, where we're taking really high quality teachers from across the whole of the West Partnership, and rather than everybody record higher maths, get one person to do that and then make those videos available for everybody to make use of. So it's got real benefits for our schools, I think, to make use of. Thank you, Convener.
Convener, I wonder if I could just briefly come back on that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, just to say that I appreciate short-term concerns over the possibility of perhaps local lockdowns would suggest that we really need to focus on the blended learning. But I'm really thinking much longer term here, just to make sure that East Renfrewshire would have such a high expectation of our education department, but just to make sure that we are going to grasp all the long-term opportunities that will come from blended learning, because we have learnt so much about the opportunities that are there over the last 6 months that I really feel that as an education department, we should be really, as I say, just trying to maximise the opportunities long-term. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Wallace. Certainly agree with you on that point, and just look forward to future updates on that. Councillor Merrick.
Thank you, Convener. You'll note that I'm still on mute, I think, but I'm not really, because I'm using my phone. So
we can hear you.
I've had to adapt and not worry about feedback, because I've done all this stuff. Anyway, I think the report is terrific to read, and it just shows the quantity and the volume and the leadership that has gone into getting the schools back, right back from the early days of the nursery provision, which we sure was able to deliver right through to this point where we're at now. And of course, there's going to be teething problems. And I've been speaking to Graham on a couple of points over the last few weeks, so and I'm going to put one of the detailed questions to you very soon if I can. I was just, what I'm looking forward to is the report on the use of additional resource to address the recovery of learning loss, because we have a cohort now that are really starting on the back foot, not just with learning loss. These are children, young people who should be doing Nat 4s, Nat 5s potentially this year, with no experience of exams, with missed out summer. And so for these, I think we've already had a cohort that have taken a hammering, and it's going to be tough on this year as well, no matter what happens. If the pandemic disappears tomorrow, it's still on the back foot so far, but I'm sure that all the plans to do the very best for them will be in place, and that will evolve as we go on. But I wanted to ask, and the discussion about the blended learning there, that was very good. I think we've done not too bad ourselves with the blended meetings, so to speak. People will take from the experience, and in general, society is becoming more comfortable and moving on, and the children will adapt to this far more quickly than some of us. The question I wanted to ask him was, for parents entering the program, okay?
Councillor Merrick, sorry, we're missing what you're saying slightly. I don't know if it's your reception.
Oh my God, the mobile phones are going out now as well.
We heard most of your contribution, just it was when you came to the question, it kind of tailed off.
All right, okay. The question is, for parents entering playgrounds, is that something for the school to decide, depending on the structure of the school, the number of parents? And if parents do enter a playground, if that's allowed, they should be socially distancing and so on, that behaviour thing. Or is that a blanket ban on parents entering playgrounds?
Okay, thank you. I think we got.
Because what I get is that Councillor Wallace will have spotted this as well. We get variations between schools, or perceived variations in policy, and then I'm sure that it's not a variation in policy. I just wanted to clarify the point.
Sure. Okay. I'm going to just bring Mr. Hay back in on the point.
Yeah, thank you, convener. Sorry, excuse me. Sorry. What we'd say is we had started off with a kind of presumption that no parents would enter playgrounds, and that certainly was what we had issued in our guidance, and our kind of risk assessments and things made that very clear. I think what some schools have spoken to our health and safety team and identified, where there is perhaps a particular part of a playground that can be used in addition to the pavement and things, where there's maybe particular challenges. What we are doing, so I wouldn't say there's a blanket ban as such. There's very much a presumption that playgrounds won't be used, because I think we're kind of very conscious that we open ourselves up to parents trying to speak to teachers and a whole range of other things that will come from that. But what we are doing is, where schools have a particular issue perhaps, then it is something that we are working with health and safety to try and identify where there may be a solution. I think that being said, though, there are some schools where we simply won't be able to make anything work. As we saw, we have got circumstances where we then had large crowds and things of parents outside the schools. So it's trying to get that balance as much as possible. Obviously, our priority is the safety of our staff and pupils, and certainly where we can maintain sort of playgrounds for your adults, that's certainly something we would be looking to do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Buchanan.
Yeah, thanks very much, convener. I think just initially to thank Graham for this paper, and indeed for everyone that's worked on it, because clearly the contribution goes across teachers, trade unions, etc., right across the board to get us to this stage. But it's very much a living document. There are things that we will learn almost on a daily, hourly basis about what is best practice, what we can do, what we can't do, etc. And I think one of the issues just highlighted has been the one of parents picking up their children, maybe congregating either at the school gates, etc., and not necessarily observing social distancing. Those messages should be out there. We know that they are going out. We just need to kind of keep reminding everyone perhaps of them and of the difficulties that we still face, because clearly the risk of an outbreak is with us constantly. It's always going to be there for the foreseeable future, and we need to minimise that as much as possible, because the last thing we want is further interruptions to the schooling of our children. So if we can avoid it, let's make sure that we get the messages as clear and succinct as possible and get that message out there to ensure that we try and mitigate the potential risk as much as possible. But I think the paper does that. It outlines where we may have been, where we might be, etc. But we know that this is very much a recovery process and there will be issues that will arise, as has already been touched on. Digital and the renewal process and longer term issues is also one that we need to put in and make sure that we learn and try and take forward some of the best parts of what lockdown has given us, from the point of view that there are things that we've recognised we might be able to do better, and let's grasp those issues and take them forward when and where we can. So thanks very much for the report. But as I say, I think very much a living document that we will learn from on an ongoing basis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Shaw, did you want to comment on these issues?
Thanks, convener. Just a few wee bits and pieces. I'll go back to the staffing that Councillor Bamforth I had asked for. Actually, we got figures through this morning. So all teachers who are back or who were off because of COVID issues, we have no absences at present from teachers and 7 absences from local government employees. Now that will cover, people like CDOs, but also anyone working in a school, a pupil support assistant, school offices, or indeed facilities management. So those are exceptionally low. And indeed, I think it is testament to the safety measures that have been put in place for staff as well. I think in terms of outside school, there are some adult behaviours that need to be addressed. I mean, we've got instances of 15 people turning up to pick up one child, 7 people turning up to pick up one child in another school. Now that is just, that is essentially people not following the national guidance about physical distancing. So our messages have been about putting out those sorts of and repeating the national messages related to physical distancing, about wearing face coverings and so on. It's not necessarily, I know Graham says that the head teacher often has more weight and the messages from them has more weight, but we've also been working with our partners in the communications service to make sure that we continue to put those messages out through the usual sort of social media. Quite often, though, it doesn't get great press. It gets a wee bit of a backlash at times because people are finding themselves anxious. But people are writing and saying, I'm anxious about this, but they're not wearing a mask when they're coming to schools. So it is about getting that national message out as much as we possibly can. But we are also learning from the outbreaks that we're seeing elsewhere. I think, certainly from what I'm seeing, and I haven't had time to see everything this morning, but as far as my knowledge is, these cases that have been cases of outbreaks in other schools have not been transmitted in the school. The transmission has not been in the school, and I think that is also very comforting to make sure that that the steps therefore that are being taken in school are being followed, but it is in the community essentially. And with track and trace, or the test and protect rather, you're bound to see more cases. I think more people are being tested, and therefore it's expected, it's logical that we'll see the numbers that who are being tested positive going up. But as Graham had said, it is a living document, and as the leader had sort of emphasised, things will change as we go along. The Scottish Government guidance will change. We're hearing just this morning that the PE guidance is likely to change again. So there will be further steps, or there might be further relaxations that we might be able to put in place once everybody gets used to and realises that we are not back to normal, but other steps still need to be taken and reducing the number of children or the number of people coming to pick up children in school, regardless of the head teacher saying 1 per child, is something that we need to continue to beat that drum and get that message out. But I think schools have done a fantastic job, and in a very short time scale, as Des had said, they have worked really, really hard, and during what was a holiday period and in quite stressful situations. But I think, from the staff that I've been speaking to, when I've been out and about, and other officers have been out and about, people are, to a certain extent, delighted to be back at work, even although it's new and it's not quite back to normal, as it were. But they are as part of their recovery, that they feel that we're back to some sort of. And I'm not going to say the new normal, although I've just said it. But they are back and sort of feeling as though they can work as near as normal as they can. So we just need to keep a watching brief on it and be ready for the first case in East Renfrewshire, and accept that we are going to get that things are going to happen, and we're going to have to react quickly to that. I think our learning from our colleagues across the West Partnership is helping in that sort of way as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Shaw, for that. Excuse me for that. Are there any further questions or comments?